Great. So here's what we're going to cover today. You're going to read it. I'm just going to go ahead and jump into a little bit about me. Hi, I'm Bren, as just introduced. I've been in software engineering for about 13 years. I have worked internationally, led teams in the US. I led teams remotely out of Ukraine, Russia, Poland, here in Vietnam, etc. So recently, I was at Zalopay, LaFleur before that. I've been working as an engineering leader in Ho Chi Minh City for the last 4 years. And my background is I have a master's in information science from UNC Chapel Hill. So the other thing is I'm very opinionated. So please, this is my opinion, backed by some data that I'm going to present, but take it for what it's worth, okay? All right, let's dive in. Before we can talk about high-impact management, we need to talk about what makes a good manager in general. And here we can pull from some data. Google did a huge project called Project Athena, where they looked at the best managers that they had and what made them good. And they found 10 traits. I put them up here. What's interesting is that only one is technical. And that one is that they have key technical skills to help advise the team. Doesn't mean that they're the best Java dev in the world or whatever. It means that they can give their team technical advice. And that's not usually how people screen for engineering managers. But that's interesting. Gallup has done some research, so is McKinsey and Company. There's a lot of overlap in terms of general management skill and what makes a good engineering manager. And that a lot of that overlap is that they're like number one for Google, is that they're a really good coach. The goal of a manager is to make their team work better, both as individuals and as a group, to achieve results. And just being good at tech doesn't make them do that. You're working with them as people who are working on tech. You're working on people, and the people do the tech, okay? So management is not about giving orders. None of those traits, in fact, the opposite is about giving orders, micromanaging, watching everything everyone does, chasing everybody everywhere like children. In fact, those behaviors are seen as negative for management, especially engineering management. We hire engineers to be smart and creative, and we want to amplify those traits to have them solve problems for us. And so trying to micromanage them kills that, okay? So your goal is to build a great team that runs on its own and is highly autonomous and highly effective because you've coached them to operate like a unit with impact, right? And good management predicts a firm's success more than just about anything. But it's actually very hard to be a good manager. So the analogy I give to my Vietnamese teams, because I do this talk when I join teams now, because they're expecting me to suddenly be some magic super dev, which is not my role, is that I talk about football, right? The coach of a football team is not the best kicker. He's not the best goalie. That's not his job. His job is to make the team win, right? It's not the same job as just being a better one of the existing players. It's helpful if you've been a player. Many good football coaches were players, but it's not the same job anymore. So if you get your joy from going to work and helping others succeed, then you'll be a good manager. If that doesn't excite you, then it's going to be a real struggle to ever become really effective as a manager, because you only win through other people. If they don't win, you don't win, right? And that's not a mentality that a lot of people think about, but it's really important. Once you realize that their victory is your victory and their failure is your failure, then you're in the right track. So let's talk about how to do that. So engineering impact. Take all this context I just talked about. How do you apply that to a company? How do you prove that your management and your team are having the impact that you want them to have and are growing and are successful, right? Because there's the business outcomes that they can measure. We made more money, we did whatever, but the engineering team doesn't directly work on that. That's not actually their accountable job. So, what we want to do is we want to look at a couple things. We want to look at how the team performs in the context of the team. We want to collect data on different aspects of performance. I'm going to talk about some really good ones. And then we also have a job as engineering managers to take that data, go to upper management, and prove that there's a return on investment for this engineering team. We can prove that we're making an impact for the company as an engineering group. And for that, a lot of engineers who become managers don't have a business background. There's three kind of metrics you can talk about to business that really make a difference to them, which is ROI, internal rate of return, and cost of capital. And all of these metrics you can look up later, learn something about, but they basically allow you to prove to the business that your team is worth paying for at the end of the day, right? Okay, so you want to make a really great team. How do you do that? What are the traits of that good team? Well, again, different research comes with slightly different answers, but a lot of overlap. Again, Google found 5 things. Number 1, psychological safety. They just feel like it's okay to open up about mistakes. They're not going to get ripped into, they're not going to get yelled at. A high-performing team is dependable. They do good work, they do it on time. They have clarity about their goals, their mission, how they're going to be measured, why it matters what they're doing, and what the impact of their work is on their unit or their company or whatever, right? So they should feel very connected to the work, both as people, and that connection should extend to the greater community or company, okay? And then internal to the team, that they communicate well, they show appreciation to each other, basically that they like each other a lot. They enjoy going to work. And the great news about all this is that if you build a really high-performing team, people will love to work at it and love going to work. So to me, that makes me happy, because if I build a high-performing team, everyone goes to work and loves it. Like, that's the goal. They should love what they're doing. They should be enthused by the work. They should feel impacted by the work. Okay, so we have limited time. Metrics to consider. Okay, so you've got to measure this stuff to show growth and impact. I've created 4 buckets here of things to look at. So high-performing teams deliver dependably and with high quality. So I've got a set of quality metrics that you can look at, a set of delivery metrics you can look at, and 4 of these metrics have a lot of research behind them where they are associated with radical, and I don't mean like a little bit outperformance, like crazy, like 100x better outperformance of teams. So if you go read the DevOps handbook or you look up DORA metrics, these are the 4 key metrics for like DevOps, and teams that excel on these metrics tend to be vastly more performing than others. But there are others as well that you want to possibly track for like team health or to track other issues. And then for the individual people, we want to look at innovation and growth. Engineers, like I said, are smart people who are very creative. They want to solve interesting problems. You don't want them to just come in, sit down, grab a JIRA ticket, hack some code, go home, and feel disconnected. You want them to have buy-in, right? We want them to have meaning and impact. So you want to give them an opportunity to have some suggestions, to innovate, to try to make things better. And if you reward them for that, they'll feel more engaged and more connected to the work, but you still need to measure that. So there's a couple of metrics here that I've added for that. And then finally, throughout the rest of the company, to look at impact, you can do 360 reviews, do like a net promoter score of your team inside the company, and so on, okay? You can ask questions about it. So I'm going to give you a story about culture and high-performing team. I used to work for a consulting firm that did sports consulting. We built stuff for NASCAR, PGA Tour, people like that. And I was on some projects with that company where I was absolutely miserable, and I was on some projects where I had a great time. Now, one of those projects was for a racing company, and we would have races on the weekend, so I'd have to work all my Saturday as overtime to monitor a race. But my boss would call me up, he'd ask me, "What pizza do you want?" And he'd deliver it to my house. And I'd be on a Zoom call with guys in Russia and Ukraine, joking around. We're all eating pizza, because they've delivered us pizza around the world, right? Watching the race, and we're also writing code. It felt like a party, I just happened to be working, right? I had a great time. I miss working those Saturdays. Those were some of the best Saturdays. I just joked around, and I wrote a lot of code, and I ate pizza. Great. But I've also had projects for that same company where we didn't have a team like that, and I'd be there on Saturday on a Zoom call, writing code with people from the same countries, and being like, "Why am I here? I hate my life," right? I'm doing the same thing, but it doesn't feel the same, and the level of engagement and the quality of work I would do were not even remotely the same. So if you're building a high-performance team, your goal is to make it feel awesome and not like work, but it's still work. You should just love doing it, right? Because no one's going to work harder than someone who loves every moment of what they're doing. Okay, so let's talk about what I've learned in Vietnam. When I talk to people about managing engineering teams in Vietnam, they often say, "Man, it's really hard. They never give me any feedback. They're quiet. I'll go into a meeting and I'll ask for questions and feedback, and it's dead silent." And that's because there's not enough trust. There's also a cultural thing. Vietnamese, in my experience, again, opinion, don't really like the whole group talk thing by default. They're not sure how they're going to be judged by you or the other team members or anything, and whenever they're not clear, they shut up. They're not going to talk. So you have to build their trust one-on-one first. And the process I use is that I will build my trust with various members, and then if I need to have a group meeting, I will go to a few of the people who I've built some trust with and say, "Look, I'm going to ask for feedback, and I'm going to tell them that if they don't feel comfortable asking me, they can come to you, and you can come to me with a compiled list, right, of all the questions, concerns, whatever, totally anonymously, right? We do this, they'll be quiet, and then usually a few people will submit questions. I get the questions, I answer them in public, and I answer them in writing because not everyone speaks great English. But then I know what's going to happen is that the engineers are going to go to their friend who I've designated and be like, "Hey, did Bryn ask who gave this feedback? Did he ask for names?" And they'll be like, "No, he didn't. He actually took the anonymous feedback. He took the anonymous questions. He didn't mind." And in that moment, even though I'm not there, I know I build a little bit of trust. And if I do these things over and over to build trust, what happens is eventually people start to speak up because they know it's safe. And this goes back to the number one trait of high-performing teams, which is psychological safety. You must build that trust and safety. That is the foundation of everything you do. And if you violate that trust, you lose a lot of ground. The second thing that I get a lot of complaints about is absenteeism, either mentally or physically. People just not showing up, they're always sick, they always have a family member who's on death's bed or whatever, right? Happens all the time. I see some people in the audience laughing, they're like, "Oh, I've had that happen," right? Here's the thing. Individual accountability is great, but team accountability is often better. Teams will have to work as a unit. So instead of looking for individual bad eggs, have the team help you. If you make the team accountable for achieving something, then if someone's slacking off, they'll get pissed at them for you and they'll let you know. If someone's genuinely got someone sick or hurt or whatever, they'll usually cover for them in the short term. Now, this again really depends on the quality of your team, the trust you've built up, and so on. But again, I gave you some metrics before that you can measure objectively. You can see how they're doing in a way that they can't argue with. How fast they're delivering, the quality of the delivery, the consistency of the delivery. These are things you can point to when you talk to them that are objective and fair, which is another thing Vietnamese are very obsessed with. They really want it to be fair, and you need to establish what fair is. But if you've established that, and you've built trust, and you drive ownership, then you're going to start getting a team that performs well. And then last but not least, plan around the team that you have and real people. One of the complaints that I get is, my team sucks at estimates. And they know they suck at estimates. But then they keep taking estimates and everything else at fake value, and they don't build a better process around estimation. If you know your team can't do it, and you keep asking to do a thing they fail at, you're setting them up to fail. So you can set up systems for estimation, and if you want to talk to me about that, I can help you with that. That's way beyond this talk. But that can also help you as well to get more consistent outcomes. So those are probably the top 3 frustrations that when I talk to people I get, so I put them here. But like I said, you can always reach out and talk to me later about other things. So that's the talk, and then I wanted to make sure there's plenty of time for Q&A, because usually I get a lot. So there's a little QR code. You can scan it. I guess you can put something into a form.
If you feel comfortable, you can also ask for a microphone.
Got to go over here.
What are you looking at? So, first of all, thanks for a very good talk. So, in a high-performing team, we need a little bit of stress for people to feel the the tension to deliver. But of course, if you put too much stress in the team, it broke the spirit.
Yeah.
So how can you find a balance to make sure that you have the right amount of stress for your team?
Perfect. That's a fantastic question. I go by the 85% rule. So there's some performance research that people over time perform at their actual peak when you push them at what they perceive is about 85% of max performance. So if they were going as hard as they could and you back off about 15%, that's actually where they perform the best. They still feel tension. It's not easy, right? It's not like 50%. But that 15% gives you some room to deal with difficulties and issues and things that come up without it being panicky. Now, the question is, how do you find that 85%? This is why you want to really track delivery. So you have, in a normal sprint planning, people will agree to what they're going to do that sprint. And then, do they deliver it? Are they delivering 80, 90, 100% of what they agreed to? If they're agreeing 50%, they're agreeing to too much and you've got a mess. If they're always delivering 100%, then it might be too easy and you can start ratcheting up carefully, right? Because some teams have a different culture. Some cultures are like, no, if we agree to it, we always get it 100% done, and their 100% is actually them already putting themselves at that level. So you've got to read the team culture, but you get them to a place where they're consistently delivering, and then you can dial it in a little bit, right? And you can also adjust by, say, adjusting quality. There's a lot of teams here that don't do a lot of automated testing. If you add automated testing and the time for that, then maybe that ups the pressure because now they have to deliver the same amount, but at a higher quality of some type, right? And that puts some pressure on to improve. So you've got some options. Does that help? Great. Only one? Come on, I've seen people making all sorts of expressions down here. People have opinions. There's this guy down here. Oh, okay, we can have a long. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is a bigger philosophical question. I believe that there's no, it's important. There's different types of engineering projects. I think there's three types. There's what I call pure projects, where it's just work to get done. For instance, migrate a bunch of services from bare metal to Kubernetes. There's nothing creative about this. There's no need to be agile. It's just work to get done, right? The requirements are going to change, for instance. Then there's product development, which is what agile is designed to do. And then there's like pure R&D research, where you may think you're doing great one day, and then it all goes to nothing the next, right? You can't manage these projects the same. So you're talking about the first type of project, I think, where it's not agile, you're just got some like time, scope, cost, classic project management setup, right?
No, it was more in general. I mean, you have the obvious thing, if you're in an agile frame, yes, agile.
So what framework are you operating in?
I'm alone.
Okay.
But we are in the agile world, but besides that, I mean, management does not necessarily be,
I'm the wrong person to ask about mechanical engineering because I've never done it. So I have no idea. Yeah. I mean, I wish, but like I wouldn't want to speak to that. I have no idea how that works.
Okay. We have two questions in the Slido.
Sure.
First one. The developers always need to be comfortable at work. How can we deal with the clients that require strictly time logging? Coding 8 hours per day may be impossible.
That's a hard one. This is an issue that, okay, so one of the things good management does is they shield developers from stuff like that. So the real way to handle that is to negotiate something else with your customer, if at all possible. Expecting devs to just be sitting there hacking at code 8 hours isn't real, because if they go up and they're on like a whiteboard or something, that's also software development. They're just not at their keyboard. And that's probably more valuable time than sitting there on your keyboard. So this is really a management failure where they haven't been able to sell this concept to the customer. And that is what has to be addressed. And it's really, I'll admit that that's hard. The way I've seen different firms handle that is if they get customers that are that bad, they just don't take them, because the cost to the firm is high. A lot of times, I've been on projects like that, we would have 50% attrition, right? It just was a bad deal for everyone. The devs were miserable, the company was miserable, the client was miserable. There was no winning, okay? So I would say renegotiate, if at all possible. I don't know any other way around that. In what way? Well, there's difference between logging hours and logging hours as programming. So I've had to log hours before, but I can say I worked 4 hours for this customer, and that can include whiteboarding and whatever else, and I can go get a coffee. I'm not down to the minute. I just say I worked 8 hours for this guy, right? But I've also worked for customers who want every frickin' minute accounted for like neurotic lunatics, and that was miserable. So accounting for hours is fine. The neurotic stuff is not.
Last question. Do you have any tips to improve the team spirit?
Okay. That's a lot longer than... okay, look. Different cultures work for different people. Not everyone loves the same thing. There's no company or team culture that's magically correct, but it's more about setting one so that people can opt in and opt out with strong choice. And if they're part of the team, then people will bond more easily. For instance, I was working for a startup company where half the company were investment bankers and the other half were startup guys who wanted to move fast and fail quick, and the other guys wanted no risk whatsoever. That did not work. Nobody was a bad person, but people's psychology, what they enjoyed, how they wanted to work, just didn't match. So I would ask first, is there a clear set of standards and ways you evaluate yourself? What do you consider good and excellent? And what is praised in the team? And what is the culture you're building? People have a hard time bonding if there's a huge culture clash. If people are in a relatively similar headspace, it's a lot easier. And sometimes you don't need everybody to bond. I see people doing team building where they're like, oh, we're going to go on this trip, or oh, we're going to do this. I thought it was maybe just an American thing, but we just did a bunch of team building at my last company, and I remember talking to the Vietnamese and like, God, I can't wait to go home. I hate this. Right? Like, they were really honest, right? Okay, was that working? No, they weren't bonding. They were just waiting to go home, and then they all went out and got drunk together. So the most effective team building was the team doing the thing that the company didn't sponsor and getting wasted, because they all wanted to do that. Now, we can't sponsor that as a company, but it was actually what worked. So, you can't force people to bond. But if you look at like militaries and stuff, what they do to get people to bond is you put people under stress and you have them help each other and you build appreciation for one another helping you under stressful situations. That tends to make people bond. And people don't need to bond over how much they love dogs or whatever, though that helps. Research says that bonding off not work stuff really helps. But mostly they just need to appreciate each other. I can have a friend, like when I worked in sports, I don't care about racing. I worked for a company that did racing. Everyone was a sports nut. I don't care at all. But I can appreciate that they love what they do, and I can share in their passion indirectly, and they can share why they love NASCAR with me, and I can share why I love anime with them. And we both like each other, and we both get that that's not our thing, but we love that guy, and we love that he loves NASCAR/anime/popcorn or whatever it is. That's where you want to be, right? But we try to fake it by thinking that if we all like the same thing, that we'll like each other. That's not true. What happens is we decide we like each other, and then we become appreciative of those aspects of the other person. And we pretend like it's the other way around, but it's not.
Thank you for all your answers. I know that we have a lot of questions happening right now. Unfortunately, we need to move on. So
you can text me. Yeah.
We can put you in contact.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah.
Thank you very much, Bren. Thank you very much.
Thank you.